Hello and welcome to another Fantasy Premier League video. My name is Steve and today we're taking a look at my wildcard review, which I pulled in gameweek 31, and my current plans for free hit 32. So for those of you who have been following the channel for a little while, I was planning to wildcard in gameweek 33, but last week I made the call to bring that wildcard forward a couple of weeks, obviously, because we're free hitting in game week 32, in order to deal with a few players in the team that were either injured or in doubt. So I had pre-wildcard, I had Shaw in my team, Rashford, Maddison, who hasn't been doing very well, Chilwell, who actually looks like he was going to play in that game, but there was a bit of a doubt with the rotation there and what's going on with Lampard. And I also had Kepa in net, and we all know that Lampard does not really rate Kepa in that Chelsea in the Chelsea goal, and so we're unsure as to how long he's going to be lasting there. And I showed a wildcard last week that was very early in the week, before all the midweek Europa games and everything that had gone on, so there was some obvious changes to the wildcard, and we'll just jump right on into it. So the final decisions for the wildcard late last week basically hindered on what was happening with Manchester United. So Shaw was touch and go as to whether or not he was going to make it. No one knew exactly how serious the Rashford injury was, and so a lot of players have actually held on to Rashford through game week 31, just chucking him on the bench and hoping that he's going to be ready for game week 34 when they double. In my team, in my wildcard team last week, I actually had Martinez in defense as basically a surefire way to lock into that Manchester United defensive line, and then he got taken off with what the reports are is a 5th metatarsal fracture, which rules him out for the rest of the season. Varane at United also got pulled off at halftime. It's down on the FPL website as a bit of a knock, but some of the reports that I was seeing before the deadline last week is that Varane could also be out for the rest of the season. And so this all had some very pretty key flow-on effects to how I ended up with this team. So we'll go through it as to what we see on screen. So the other point I should mention about Manchester United was in that game against Sevilla, they lined up with Casemiro and Fernandes in the defensive midfield positions, and then they played Sabitzer in 10. He actually scored 2 goals in that game. And so after the match, I was thinking, well, we've now lost both of our centre-backs in Martinez and Varane. Shaw may or may not play, and if he does play, I thought he'd probably play at centre-back to try and shore up the defensive structure, but there was no guarantees that he was going to play either. And so considering that Sabitzer scored twice and Fernandes has been looking amazing in that defensive midfield role, I thought that Ten Hag would probably line up with something similar for their game against, was it Nottingham Forest? Geez, I'm drawing a bit of a blank there. Yeah, Nottingham Forest away. Turns out that what happened was he actually pushed Fernandes forward into the 10 position and started Eriksen, with Eriksen actually having a bit of license to get forward. He was joining a lot of the attack in that Nottingham Forest fixture, and actually Fernandes was also doing a lot of defensive covering. He was all over the pitch. He was up and down that whole game, and he was probably the scariest player to watch as a non-owner. I don't know how he didn't come away with an absolute monster haul in that match. So I'm a little bit concerned about not owning him moving forward, but I think he'll probably get his share of minutes still in that CDM role as a bit of rotation comes in throughout the squad. So that all of those injuries and the change to the formation basically meant that I still wanted to jump on the United defence, considering the two doubles that they had coming up, and their run of fixtures was relatively kind, and so I ended up with going with De Gea in net, and I did keep Steele in my squad. So last week on the wildcard, I had Steele and Fabianski, with Steele being my main playing keeper for basically all of the games. And the reason that I didn't want to go like Steele and De Gea or Steele and Ederson is that you cannot play both of those keepers when they are doubling, unless of course you're using a bench boost, which I will be in game week 34. But there's another double later in the season, about game week 37, still not locked in yet, where United and Brighton should also double, and so at that point I will have to bench one of the doublers in my squad, which was something I was trying to avoid. But I took another look at it, and I managed, well, I basically looked at the difference in fixtures coming up. So Fabianski was only there to be for the bench boost on game week 34. He didn't have a great double in 34, and I wasn't really going to play him in any other fixture anyway. And so Steele had the fixture against Chelsea last week, whereas De Gea was obviously away to Nottingham Forest. And so if I went with De Gea, I could play De Gea in game week 31. So I picked up that extra fixture when Steele was obviously going to be facing Chelsea away. Steele looks like he has picked up an injury. It's a little bit sketchy as to what is actually going on there. I pulled up some reports that said De Zerbi said yesterday in the pre-match press conference that a couple of his players are managing injuries and late calls will have to be made. In hyphen, Steele was clearly one of those. The nature of the injury has not been confirmed, but it has been described as an unspecified slight injury, and that he was left out of the Chelsea match as a precaution. So I didn't actually get that news until after the deadline had passed. So Steele was not flagged, did not look like he wasn't going to start. It actually came through quite late that he was on the bench. And so I'm still hoping that it's just a slight injury and he hasn't decided that Steele's no good and he's switched back to Sanchez, because that will kind of ruin the plans for the game week 34 bench boost with Steele in that spot. But I guess we will have to wait and see. So we went with De Gea. We get to play De Gea in, as I mentioned, game week 31. There was another fixture, I believe. Excuse me, got a bit of a cough there. So Nottingham Forest away. When I get the team back in game week 33, De Gea will be away to Tottenham, but Brighton are away to Nottingham Forest, so I'll be rotating my keepers there. In the game week 34 double, both keepers are doubling. That'll be part of my bench boost. And then for the remainder of the season, it's pretty much of a muchness. De Gea and Steele both have a great run of fixtures. Steele will have a double when Manchester United don't. It is likely that both Brighton and United will double in 37, and so I will be down one fixture then. But that's still quite far away from now, and that was the concession that I kind of had to make with all the injuries to United. And why we went with the double up of two keepers that were going to be doubling. So across the back line, I held on to Trippier, I held on to Botman, because Newcastle still have they have one double coming up and a relatively kind run of fixtures when you don't count 32. It was Aston Villa 31, Everton 33, Southampton 34, tricky fixture against Arsenal 35, double probably 36, and then Leicester 37 to finish off the season with Chelsea away. The Newcastle defensive unit has been pretty solid, but I actually watched the full 90 against Aston Villa at the weekend, and God, Ollie Watkins, I am a non-Watkins hokey cokey with Haaland. So when everyone sold Haaland for the blank to bring in Watkins. Watkins got 5 points that week and Haaland was on a 0. Then went into the international break and Haaland was going to be on my bench for the bench boost against Liverpool, which is when Liverpool weren't doing so well. I was very happy to be playing Haaland. Man City ended up beating Liverpool 4-1 without Haaland because he picked up an injury in the international break, which was very lucky for the Watkins hokey cokiers. Then, of course, Watkins gets a whole bunch of jammy goals across the last couple of game weeks. And then at the weekend against Newcastle, to be fair to Aston Villa, they looked amazing in that game. Newcastle's defence was nowhere near where it should have been. The centre-backs were just letting Ollie Watkins run free. They were not picking him up in the box. They gave him way too much space, which is just... I mean, Watkins is the only real danger man in the Aston Villa team, and they just let him do whatever he wants, run around, heaps of space, ball at the feet, and he came away with an absolute monster haul to further punish me for not going with Watkins hokey cokey. I'd say up to this point, Watkins has been a little bit jammy with like Cucurella through balls to him one-on-one with the keeper and whatnot, but fair play to Watkins this week. He looked quality against what should have been a pretty decent Newcastle side. So Botman actually came in off the bench for Nathan Ake, who came in on my wildcard and was obviously immediately rotated to just stick a nail in the coffin for choosing to go with a City defender instead of going with someone like Edison and net. As I talk through the rest of the team, you'll realise that I'm actually on 0.0 million in the squad. I've got 0.6 million sitting in the bank. That is to go from Martinelli to Rashford in game week 34 if Rashford is fit and ready by then. And so leaving that 0.6 million in the bank meant that I was basically hard up against it with 0.0 million remaining. Couldn't get to the likes of Edison. I was even looking at John Stones, but had to save the 0.3 million. I also had Matoma in the squad, and had to downgrade him to March to get hold of that extra well, not downgrade, sorry, but buy a cheaper player. March and Matoma are pretty close in terms of expected stats and whatnot, with March obviously coming out a bit more on top, but the 0.4 million saved there was spent as well. So I was running hard up against it. Stones would have been nice as he obviously scored the goal at the weekend, but hey, it is what it is. I decided to stick with Konate, even though he was reported to have missed 2 training sessions. He is only 4.8 million, owned by 0.8% of the game, and has started the last 7 games in a row for Liverpool, so I was very happy to see him on the park at the start of the match against Leeds. The Liverpool-Leeds game was actually a very big part of the reason why I wanted to pull that wildcard forward to game week 31, because Leeds had played Crystal Palace at home, at Leeds' home ground, the week earlier and got pumped by 5 goals. I said in last week's video I thought Liverpool would do the same or better, 5, 6, 7 goals, and they came out winning 6-1. And of course it's Konate that decided he didn't want the clean sheet. Was super lazy on the ball with Sinistera bounding down on him. Just left it for Sinistera. Sinistera runs through on goal and scores the only goal for Leeds to wreck the clean sheet. So not ideal, but good to see that he did start, even though he did miss some of the training events during the week. And he is there for that game week 34 double. As I mentioned, I have Nathan Ake as my 4th defender, and I went with Kurt Zouma as my 5th defender, trying to keep it super cheap, 4.4 million just for that double in game week 34, away to Crystal Palace and away to Man City. It is not an ideal double, but it is slim pickings in terms of defense for that game week 34 double, and so we had to go with someone Malacia was in that spot last week. I had to have a serious think about what was going on with the United defence with all of those changes, and I decided to err on the side of caution, go with the guy that was nailed on, even though their fixtures are a lot worse than Manchester United's in game week 34, and thankfully I made that move because Malacia did not even start in that depleted backline. They actually played Delow at left back, I believe, with Wan-Bissaka out at right back, Maguire and Lindelof in the centre of defence. Across the middle of the park, I went with Martinelli for their fixture away to West Ham. He actually did earn the assist, well, the handball assist for Saka's penalty, which Saka actually missed, and so it could have been another 3 points for the assist. Potentially snuck into the bonus with that, but we'll take the assist there. Salah was one of the reasons we were obviously wildcarding early. We've gone with a 3 premium wildcard because that is served me very well over the season when I have had 3 premiums in the squad. Salah scored 2, had a third goal disallowed for offside with Van Dijk being offside by a couple of millimetres. Looked like he had a great game. Obviously it was against Leeds, who are not looking well. They are definitely a team to target for the remainder of the season. And Salah thankfully comes away this morning with a 14-pointer to cover the Watkins points up front that I missed out on by not going with Watkins on this wildcard. We held on to Jack Grealish. I had already transferred Jack Grealish in a game week earlier. He stays on the wildcard and earned his assist through a handball for Haaland to sink his penalty. McAllister and March were the 2 Brighton midfielders I went for. It was originally McAllister and Matoma, as I mentioned earlier. I played McAllister because he's on pens. Comes away with a blank in game week 31. The Brighton boys, everyone's got them. Don't need to go into too much detail there. Haaland was obviously still there in my team. Obvious captain choice this week. Couple of goals. Haaland doing Haaland things. I think he's coming up to Alan Shearer's all-time Premier League record to score 34 goals in 32 games or something, and I think in the season that Shearer did that, there was more games in the season. I don't quite know how that happened, but Haaland is absolutely destroying everything that's been built up over the many years that the Premier League has been around. Harry Kane against Bournemouth. Yeah, Spurs are a bit of a worry. They are not looking too tidy. They haven't been looking too tidy for a while, but Harry Kane has been continuing to return points irrespective of how Spurs have been performing. This week, not so much. Comes away with 2 points, which is not great. I would have really liked all 3 premiums to bang this week because that is the big differential that I have over most of the competition at the moment, with most teams out there only having 2 premiums, which seem to be mostly Haaland and Kane. A lot of managers will be making the decision on switching Kane to Salah. Well, this week if they're not on a free hit, or game week 33 or 34 if they are free hitting this week. So hopefully holding on to Kane, he can do the business at the remainder of for the rest of the season. And then the final spot up front last week on my wildcard was Anthony Martial. He did start in that Sevilla match, which was bonus for what I thought would shore him up to start in that Nottingham Forest fixture. Then I had a very close look at the schedule to see how likely it was that Martial was going to continue to start. And the turnaround time for the games looked so tight, and with Martial coming back from injury, he's been out for a while. We all know exactly how injury prone he is, and so I thought if Ten Hag was going to rest Martial for any game coming up, it was probably going to be for that Nottingham Forest fixture away. Now, Martial did start. He made it through to the 70-odd minute mark. And in a very attacking United display, that we absolutely peppered the Nottingham Forest goal. I don't know how United didn't come away with a bucket load more goals there, but Martial did not seem to be involved in a hell of a lot under the eye test. I think he had about 2 shots that I remember seeing, whereas I think Fernandes probably had a chance to score about 3 goals and 3 assists in that match and came away with 3 points because he obviously got the clean sheet. So in a very dominant attacking display, Martial was mostly absent in those attacking moves, and so I'm wondering if that's just because there's obviously a lot of movement around in the United team with injuries all over the place, and then Casemiro coming back and people switching in and switching out, so they're potentially not too used to playing with Martial up front. Rashford's been playing there a lot more, but against a very weak opposition in Nottingham Forest, didn't really manage to get in a hell of a lot of the attack. I'm kind of glad that I've gone against Martial and went with Isak, who unfortunately Newcastle just looked woeful in that Aston Villa match. They didn't generate much attack at all. They spent most of the time in their own half defending the goal and not defending it very well, as I have already mentioned. Isak was 0.4 million more expensive than Martial, down at 6.7 compared to Martial's 6.3. This is why I had to transfer Mitoma to March to get that 0.4 million saving in order to upgrade Martial to Isak. The thoughts there were I can still go from Isak to Martial in game week 34 if I want to. I will have a couple more games of watching United before that game week 34 fixture comes around, and so I can jump on Martial a little bit later. See if he doesn't get injured before game week 34, see if he continues to start, and also see how the rest of the United team actually lines up for the fixture it's actually just one fixture now, which is game week 33. So I was obviously keeping a close eye on 31, and we'll see what happens in that game week 33 fixture. And so this is the wild card that I went with. If I very quickly just bring up the FPL team, I'll just roll it forward to game week 34 for the doubles, and I'll see if I can zoom this in. Does this zoom work? Sort of. So as you can see, I've got 0.6 million in the bank, which is enough to go Martinelli to Rashford in game week 34. So this will it comes down here. So Rashford would come in. I will probably have 2 transfers this week. It may be Isak to Martial. This is potentially what I'm doing. I may even have thoughts of going Harry Kane to a Liverpool attacker for their double in game week 34, but this is how the bench boost team is lining up. Everyone in the team doubles apart from Trippier and Botman against Southampton at home and Kane away to Liverpool, assuming that I'm definitely selling Martinelli for Rashford if Rashford is fit. If Rashford is not fit, I will probably look at a punt on someone like Sancho or Anthony, maybe even Eriksen, depending on what we see in that game week 33 fixture. I have to wait and see. I'm probably more than happy to play Kane against Liverpool away in this fixture because the top of the table clashes, or the big teams when they're playing each other, it seems to be a lot of goals are going in, and so if there are going to be a lot of goals scored in that game, I would suspect that Harry Kane is probably going to do alright there. And the only other slight worry now that's come straight after the wild card is obviously Steele not making it onto the pitch at the weekend. Fingers crossed it is a real injury, not some sort of excuse in order to drop Steele after only a few games starting out on the pitch in replacement of Sanchez. I'd find it it'd be quite strange for De Zerbi to give Steele a shot, only play him for like, what, 3 or 4 games? How many games did he get? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games. Is 6 games enough to decide that you actually made a mistake and you drop Steele again to go back to Sanchez? I'm not so sure. I'm hoping it's just a small injury and that he will be back for game week 33, and then I will be a lot more comfortable with the bench boost in game week 34. So I got 66 points, the average was 55. We've got a green arrow on the wild card. It was a red arrow before the Liverpool game, so thankfully Salah has saved my game week there, and we move on to the game week 32 free hit. Now, I'm obviously recording this just after the Liverpool game. It's the 18th of April in New Zealand, 2 p.m, so it's still the 18th in the UK. All the games have been played for the week. It is still very early in the week without any news. And this is how the free hit is largely lining up. We won't spend too long on the free hit because I think most content creators out there are probably free hitting this week. Twitter will be absolutely full of teams going up, and I think a lot of the teams are going to look very similar. The main decisions to make are which 3 Liverpool and which 3 Arsenal are you going with, and then who are the other differentials that you're just going to slot in around the place. For me, in this game week, I think finding a clean sheet is actually quite tough. The obvious clean sheets on paper is Arsenal versus Southampton, Liverpool versus Nottingham Forest, and probably Crystal Palace against Everton as the safest looking clean sheets. I think Bournemouth and West Ham both score. Newcastle and Spurs probably both score. Leicester and Wolves would probably be the 4th game. Who knows what's going to go on there. Leicester are a bit of a shambles. Wolves can't really score goals. That could quite easily be a 0-0, I suppose. I think Brentford and Villa probably both score. Fulham might be able to keep a clean sheet against Leeds, given how bad Leeds have been for the last couple of game weeks, but that seems like a bit of a punt, and so we've just gone Robertson and Alexander-Arnold from Liverpool against Nottingham Forest at home. They're both at home. I'm trying to keep all the defenders at home this week just for that added advantage of the ability to keep the clean sheet. I've gone with Ben White from Arsenal as the most attacking Arsenal defender. Yeah, I was lining up earlier on with 3 Arsenal attackers for that really good fixture, but like I said, finding the clean sheets is hard. I think it's just easy to chuck in Robertson, Alexander-Arnold and Ben White across the back line. I've gone with Johnston in goal for Crystal Palace against Everton at home. Crystal Palace have been looking okay across the last couple of fixtures. Obviously they pumped Leeds by 5 goals. I think it was 5-1, was it? Yeah, so it was 5-1, so they did concede in that match. They did keep a clean sheet against Southampton last week away at Southampton's home ground, so we're hoping he can keep another clean there. Across the middle of the park, the 2 Arsenal attackers that I'm going with is Saka and Martinelli. I bought Martinelli in on the wild card and sold Odegaard, and of course Odegaard goes and scores. That's just the way that FPL goes. My Liverpool attacker is Salah. I think Salah will be in every free hit draft. That's just the way it's going to go. He is going to be my captain. Saka is the vice captain. I'm pretty sure that won't change before the deadline unless something comes out during the week. And then my 4th slot in midfield at the moment is my first differential in Ben Rama. He took a penalty in game week 31 and scored it against Arsenal. He played the 90 minutes against Arsenal, only got 30 against Fulham the week earlier. But then prior to that, it was 62, 90, 90, okay, 45 against Brighton, 82 against Forest, 18 against Spurs, 66 against Chelsea. So his minutes are a little bit suspect. He obviously has not made the start against Fulham. I don't know if he started and played the first half or not against Brighton. Didn't make the start against Tottenham. Didn't make the start against Leeds or Wolves. So Ben Rama is definitely up in the air. Bournemouth are a team that can be got at, though. If he does play, I suspect that he could return quite well, and he will be quite a differential. Currently owned by 1.1% of the game, and on penalties if he's on the pitch. That spot might change by the deadline at the end of the week. And then up front, I've got Dominic Solanke, who scored, I think, a couple goals? Sorry, 1 goal, 2 assists for a 15-pointer against Spurs away last week in game week 31. West Ham can definitely be got at as well. This could be a 1-1, 2-1, 2-2, could even go a bit higher. I'd love to jump on someone quite differential like Dominic Solanke, who should be on pens. I don't think Bournemouth have actually been given a penalty all season, but it's ideal to try and grab hold of penalty takers when you can. I'm going to stick with Harry Kane up front, I think. It is not a great game against Newcastle away, but having just watched that 90 minutes of Newcastle and them just leaving Watkins free and open as often as Watkins wants to, if they do the same thing to Harry Kane is absolutely going to punish them in this fixture. And so if they haven't learnt their lesson, I'm pretty happy going with someone like Harry Kane, even though many free hitters may swerve Harry Kane, and all non-free hitters will probably have Harry Kane in their squads. And so free hitting with Harry Kane in, I mean, this team's got this has got 2.1 million in the bank, so I'm not at all short of funds. We can upgrade pretty much anyone anywhere. But Harry Kane has been pretty consistent across the last run of fixtures apart from game week 31, so he will probably stay in on the wild card. And then Ollie Watkins, the bane of my existence for the last 4 game weeks or so since the international break. He looked absolutely phenomenal in that match against Newcastle. I cannot go into this match without him. Brentford away is definitely a game where they could be scoring a lot of goals. I think Brentford will also probably score in this game. It could actually be quite a high scoring game here, and so we've chucked Watkins in. So we got Watkins penalty taker, Kane penalty taker, Solanke penalty taker, Ben Rama penalty taker, Salah and Saka all penalty takers. So 6 of my 7 attackers are all penalty takers, with Martinelli being the only one who is not. Andreas sits on the bench at home to Leeds. He could quite easily start this week if you are looking to scrimp and save somewhere and you're looking for, I don't know why you would need to be, but if you are, Andreas on pens without Mitrovic in the team and Leeds looking absolutely woeful, he could quite easily start for game week 32 if you are so inclined. Trippier is on the bench. He is still sitting there. He has not been traded. I've obviously got money tied up with him. I do not need that money at all. I think I'm probably going to go against Trippier this week as a way to differentiate myself from those non-free hitters who will all almost certainly be playing Trippier this week, and Bueno is just a dead spot in the final spot on my bench. 3.8 million. Don't even know if he's playing. Is he playing? He's not even playing, which is fine. Everson is my backup goalkeeper who will not get onto the pitch. And that is how the free hit GW32 is lining up. So, a bit of a short one today. There's not a hell of a lot going on. The free hit won't be finalised until right up until the deadline, but this is pretty much the structure I'm largely going to be going with. And hopefully when I get my wildcard team back in game week 33, we can march on forward to a great run of green arrows and put a bit of respectability back into my rank. So that's it for today's video. Considering you have made it this far through the video, please do consider giving it a like, and if you are new around here, hit the big red subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified about more FPL content coming your way. And until next time, I'll catch you again shortly. Cheers.